All right. I mean, I think we can get started. Are you ready to get started, Russell?
I am, yeah. I'm excited about this. Let's go.
Well, hey, it's coffee right now, but cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for meeting me out at Discourse Coffee. I have just barely enough room to sip coffee with the headset on.
That's
today,
what I was going to say. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I got to use my other hand.
Yeah, it's a skill, but just to set context of where we are, this is a coffee shop here in Milwaukee that's also next to 88.9 Radio Milwaukee. So I'm like, what a great place to record a podcast that also doubles as a spot where behind this garage they do some shows over there and things like that.
Nice.
So I'm like, this is like built for like a podcasting performance, all things considered. So, well, thank you for making the drive up from Illinois tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm glad to talk and excited.
And before we jumped into this, I actually went back and looked at my notes from IMTS, the International Manufacturing Technology Show, where you and I were first talking about this, like, I don't know, probably by the time this comes out, like 6 months ago or so.
Yeah, it goes by fast.
And I made one note about what our podcast was going to be about. And I said, Russell is buying machine shops and bringing them together with software. So tell us a little bit about that. You know, and I know your story's evolved since then, but how are you buying machine shops and bringing them together with software? Where did this start?
Well, so if I go back even before that, like I'm a third-generation tool and die maker. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in my grandpa's tool and die shop. By the time I was involved, it had already been around for 30 years. Basically, my dad was told, you got to run the family business, and I was raised with go out and do whatever you want, you know, go to school or the military. And originally wasn't even planning on being involved in it because it was family-owned and there was some drama and stuff. And so how things ended up working out was the partners wanted to retire. My dad bought them out and said he didn't want to run it without me. And so I came back on board and eventually bought him out. And that's when I started talking with other owners and just realized, wow, it seems like a lot of these guys are all retiring. So maybe there's an opportunity here. So that was kind of the original spark of interest for building this network, which we've now named US MFG. And basically, we developed our own software that allows us to. We originally started with buying companies, so we bought 4 small manufacturers and linked them together through the software. So essentially, they can balance out their labor and their workloads between companies. And now it's kind of morphed into just building this network where we partner with entrepreneurs, help them buy companies from retiring owners, and then work collaboratively to just grow them. So provide a lot of back-end support and that sort of thing.
And we're going to talk about your new mission as well as your original mission, because I think it's very interesting that this has evolved since you and I first met. But I still think there's a lot of opportunity that manufacturing leaders should be aware of in general that ties in to both of the things you were working on. So I'm very curious, when you found those 4 machine shops, how did you decide that those machine shops were the right fit for what you were doing? Was there something they had in common, or were there differences that you were looking for? It's like, oh, machine shop 1 over here is really good at this, and machine shop 3 over here is really good at this. If there wasn't like a cohesive strategy, that's okay too, but I'm just curious what you were looking for, maybe what you learned on the back end.
Yeah, I would say that there was not that much of a cohesive strategy. You know, I was homeschooled, grew up in the shop, grew up on a farm, and it's kind of just been this find an opportunity, figure out how to solve, provide a solution. And so originally it was really just talking with owners, and if they didn't have a succession plan, I'd be like, hey, we can work out a deal. And so the first one was from my dad, so we were doing contract manufacturing, CNC machining. The second one was another machine shop, so I was comfortable with the work that they did. I guess it got a little bit more strategic in the next 2, because the next one was a product line that used machine shops to make their parts.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, well, we can do that. And then the 4th one was a machinery dealership that refurbished machines and sold them, and also provided supports and maintenance. So the thinking behind that was a little more strategic too. Like, oh, well, we're going to have a lot of assets that are underutilized that we could sell off and if we could do that in an orderly fashion, it'd be better than just having an auction. So I think it got a little bit more strategic, but at first the excitement of approaching a deal was a lot more like, oh man, I can make any deal happen. And it was like, now I've just kind of learned that not every deal is a good deal.
Sure. It's funny listening to you say it because it does sound like there's a growth strategy there, right? You got machine shop number 1 from your dad, so obviously you got to get business number 1 somewhere. And then it sounds like you kind of repeated that for the second one.
Yeah.
So just kind of like a scale, like you have another one where you can scale up. But, the fact that you got a product line that used machine shops as like the third place you were at, and then a spot that sounds like more of a dealership and some of the service for it, like it does feel like a smart strategy in the way that you were growing.
Yeah, I would say that it kind of morphed into that. I think initially it was just people that I would talk to, or like the machinery guy, he was servicing our machines. Mm-hmm. So it was like, oh, hey, what's your plan? So it was very like organic how it happened, but yeah.
No, I think it makes sense. So, what you made a comment though, not every deal is a good deal. What are the red flags you look for when, or just maybe a gut feel that you start to get where it's like, this isn't a machine shop that we should acquire?
Well, I think going into it, really not having experience in any of that M&A world, something that I've worked on developing a lot more is a mindset of trust but verify, as opposed to just trust, which sounds very basic, but to me that was a new thing. And just going over with a finer tooth comb actual financials and setting clearer expectations at the beginning really pay off. Whether that's your actual like asset purchase agreement or even starting with your LOI, having more clarity in that helps set the stage for success. So I would say red flags big time is culture. I think that's probably number 1. Obviously, financials are important, but you're not going to look at a deal if the financials aren't there. So if it doesn't have a culture, if you're doing a roll-up and you're bringing it into your existing location, that's huge. Obviously, your team needs to work together. But even if you're leaving it there, what's the temperature of people being willing to innovate and change the way they've done things for 40 or 50 years?
Got it. Okay. No, I'm writing down a lot of notes here because the very powerful thing you said at the start of that was you have a mindset of trust but verifying, which I think is very fair. That's a very engineering manufacturing approach to it. You talk about some of the things I feel like are kind of black and white, right? The financials, right? You either have good financials or they might be a little dicey. So that one's a little easier to determine when you're doing your verification. Little things like the letter of intent, right? Setting expectations. I like that you highlighted culture as the potential red flag. You specifically mentioned a company's willingness to innovate. How quickly do you get that vibe from a machine shop when you walk through the door? Is it
that's still something I'm figuring out. It's just like I think coming from my heart behind what I'm doing is a lot more of a mission mindset, and just really wanting to work with people, really wanting to make things happen and help people provide good paying jobs and employee equity. Those kind of things I think sometimes cause me to overlook some potential cultural misfits and stuff like that. So that's something I'm still learning. How do you figure out if this person is trustworthy? You don't want to build a relationship for 4 years before it's the deal to do. But how do you build that relationship and get to know somebody and their culture in a short amount of time? So.
Well, and obviously a lot of people are going to be learning as they go during this process. Would you say up to this point your judgment's been pretty solid, right, with the ones that you've purchased and added to your portfolio, if you will?
I would say I'm probably about 50% of the way there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, and one thing that I've learned is just bring in, I've been fortunate to have a handful of mentors my whole life in different areas. And so bring in people that have more experience than me. I'm 31 now, so I've learned some stuff, right? But when it comes to being able to tap into those resources of other relationships and say, hey, what do you think about this person or this deal, or what vibe do you get? I think that helps a lot more than me just trying to do it alone.
Yeah, so it's one thing to talk about how do you find the machine shops. I'll get back to that in a second, but how do you find your mentors? How have you gone about locating those?
Oh, man. Some of them, it's been recommendations just from talking to people in the industry, and they're like, oh, you should talk to so-and-so. That's what they do. And then I talk with them, and if I feel like there's a connection there, I'll just ask. You don't get what you don't ask for, and I'll just be like, hey, could we talk once a month, or could we talk when I have a question about certain part of business or life? Another area is just my wife and I play basketball twice a week, pickup games. Yeah. And, when you're playing a sport or any activity like that, you get to see a different side of people and their competition and their relational qualities. And there was one person in particular that was just like, man, this guy pushes himself really hard. He's always supportive of his team. When he fails, it's his fault. It's not like someone else did something wrong. And I was just like, I like that. And so that led to a really good mentorship. And he actually became an investor too. So it was like, there's a saying that's, if you want investment, ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask for investment.
Yes.
And I feel like that's so accurate because it's, I don't know, the concept of like asking for money, but people are always going to give you advice because there's something to improve on, But if you're asking for advice, people love that. And if you're willing to take it and learn and grow and actually put it into action, then they're like, oh, I see an investment here. You know?
It's funny. You are literally the second person in less than a week. I don't know if this episode will come out before or after yours, but you're the second person that's brought that piece of advice up on the show. A young lady who's running a startup out of Pittsburgh brought it up as well. So, no, great piece of advice to drill home. I like that you mentioned you were finding folks, through your extracurriculars like basketball.
Yeah. Yep.
You in conversations, you identified people where it's like, oh, this person seems to have this skill set. Can I talk to you once a month, etc. And also, just other folks being like, hey, you're trying to do this right now. You should talk to so-and-so. So a few different paths to finding mentors, all of which I think are really good advice for how you find them. It's not all, just coming up to someone and asking them, hey, will you be my mentor? It's having some intent behind it, and it's not always going to happen where you think it might happen.
Another good network for me was the SCORE mentorship program. You can just go online to, I think it's score.com/mentor or something like that. And it's a small, I think it's funded through the SBA. But basically it's a volunteer network that connects you with people who are looking to give back from their history and experience. And you just select what category you want advice in. And that was really helpful. Yeah, that was really good.
SCORE Mentorship. I'm going to look them up and include a link to that in the show notes page for all the folks listening out there. I'm going to ask you one more question on like the buying of machine shops. Then we're going to switch to how US MFG has evolved and where it's going. But we were talking about finding mentors. Now, an actionable piece of advice out there for the audience, because I just think there are so many machine shops out there. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's in the thousands of people that are going to be retiring that don't necessarily have a transition plan for the shop they own, which I think represents a once-in-a-generation type of entrepreneurship opportunity where folks can go out, whether it's buying an individual shop, whether it's teaming up with you, leveraging your software to buy a few and link them together. So what would your advice be for entrepreneurs or prospective entrepreneurs of any age, whether they're our generation in their 30s, whether it's someone, hey, maybe they're in their 50s or 60s and they're looking for their next adventure? What would be your advice in terms of keeping an eye out, or specifically kind of where to look for some of these opportunities that might pop up to acquire a shop or some shops?
Yeah, so a little bit more background on the actual number that are out there. So back in I think this was 2020, 2022, when we started US MFG, based on Census Bureau data, there's 100,000 of these small manufacturers with under 20 employees, and that are owned by baby boomers. So they estimate that over half of them don't have succession plans. So the opportunity isn't just prevalent; it's
So if that
it's
number's
rampant.
100,000, that means it's 50,000 companies that don't have a succession plan right now.
So,
wow.
I mean, I would say first piece of advice I would say is, do what you know. Come from your background. Don't step into an area that is less known to you, because obviously it's going to be easier to run something that you know, but also you're going to have more respect from that seller, because these businesses are very personal.
Yep.
It's been their baby for 40 years, and they're losing part of their identity when they sell it. So they want to know that someone has experience and comes from the industry, which sets a lot of people up really well. You know, if this is something you've already done for 10 or 15 or 20 years working for someone else, go knock on some doors. You probably already have some industry connections, and start that conversation. And that's kind of the point of US MFG. It's like help bring up those conversations. Maybe you've worked somewhere and the owner's 70 or 75. You never thought of having that conversation. Bring it up, and here's how you can do it. So.
Yeah. No, I like that. So another way I heard what you describe is do what you know, is the way you said it. Like play to your strengths, play to your experience, because there's going to be some natural respect there from the seller who, like you said, has put a lot of their life into this.
Yeah.
But yeah, with just the sheer number that you mentioned, I mean,
it's crazy.
It's just nuts. And I think that is a nice segue into maybe why you evolved your mission with what US MFG does, where you're not just focused on being the guy that's going to buy all the shops and bring them together under the software. Really, you're more focused on the community and the software and helping other people more or less replicate what you've done so far.
Yeah, well, and really, because the idea of small business ownership, I think, is kind of romanticized as like the epitome, like you're free. And it's like, well, actually, there's a lot that goes into it. When I bought the company from my dad, I still have a year left of paying him back, so I'm almost done with that.
Sure.
But I made like half of what I made when I was working for him, because now it's my responsibility. Now I have to make sure we make payroll, and I'm the one staying late. So the concept of small business ownership, I think, is a lot more beautiful when you work together with people and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's systems out there that help you grow and track metrics that help you improve, that have already been figured out. So if you can just build a network of people that have a collaborative mindset, that's, I think, where the real value is. Yes, you could go out and buy one or two or three by yourself, or form a group, but imagine the opportunity if you had thousands of these working together. And you're still incentivized. You're still incentivized through the network because you're the majority owner, but the concept is just community. And you're going to be going through the same process that 100 other individuals are going through, so you're all learning at the same time. It's in the same industry, manufacturing, but it can be across, many different skill sets or, specific areas of production.
Yeah, I like that you talked about how sometimes we over-romanticize like small to medium-sized business ownership. But I think one of the most important parts of what you just said is that you're, at least in my estimation, you're providing one of the things that most people are lacking when they buy a business, which is people that know exactly what they're going through to turn to.
Yep.
So you're building that community so that as people acquire these thousands of shops that are out there, they have other business leaders to chat with that are essentially running very similar businesses to what they're doing and solve problems together.
Yep.
That's a very cool mission.
That's and to me, that's the power. That's what the vision and the mission is about, as opposed to, let's go out and buy a bunch, and it's a lot more scalable when you think about empowering people to accomplish more by incentivizing them and connecting them. So that's really why it morphed that way. And it's because I tried it the first way, and it was like, oh, I was driving between Elgin and Hampshire and Rockford every day, three different cities running three different shops.
We're all yours in like the, for lack of a better word, like the greater like Chicagoland region?
Yeah. Okay. They were about an hour and a half apart between all three of them. So it was just
But still, like how, like I can guarantee you, pretty much every metropolitan region has a bunch of other shops that, like, you know, an entrepreneur in St. Louis or Kansas City or Little Rock could, you know, like they could leverage what you're creating and basically kind of create that little network just in their region. You don't have to go too far to find these.
No, they are literally everywhere. If you drive down and you see a brick building, there might not even be a sign out front, but if there's a couple cars in there, it's probably manufacturing. You know, there's probably something. They might have a few presses in there, or they might have a couple CNCs, or, you know, stuff like that. So.
Well, I want to get into your story and maybe your aha moment, if there was a moment or if this kind of gradually came to you. Because, like I said, 6 months ago we were chatting and you were going to be the one buying the machine shops and putting your software on top of it to bring them together. And we should talk about the software at some point because I'm interested to understand how that ties them together. But was there a moment where you realized your mission was changing, or that you needed to change the mission of US MFG?
I think I got tired of being limited by my personal capabilities and just realized that, one, I've done things, but like I don't have as much experience as I need to make the impact that I want to contribute to, you know? So coming to that realization was through doing stuff and failing and realizing, okay, I'm not so good in this area. Well, I'm really good in this area. Well, how do you transform that into the vision? Well, we could provide support in areas for people who have worked in shops for a long time, but maybe don't understand the finance side of it or the relational customer side of it, or, you know, that sort of stuff. And I was like, because I've failed in those areas on my own, I already know this is probably a relevant resource that could be supported. So it was a natural transition in my mindset. It wasn't really like one key aha moment. Although the more that I've thought about it since we've made that transition, the more I am like, I think this is the way to go. I think building a community is going to be more impactful.
Well, I mean, I'm biased because I've built a community with manufacturing happy hour as well. But I totally hear what you're saying. But it was, as I understand it, very entrepreneurial of you to shift focus because you were running your own business. You knew what it was like to run 4 machine shops and have to drive around between all of them. And, you know, obviously there's some, you know, you were experiencing the challenges of being able to scale beyond that at the moment. But you also said, hey, if this is the challenge I'm having and I'm figuring a lot of this out on my own, why not I create a network so I can help other people out there do the same thing I've done? Because you see the bigger opportunity, right?
Yeah.
It's not, you know, just Russell Winter buying 4 machine shops, maybe someday 8, 10. It's, oh my goodness, there are tens of thousands of these out there.
Yep.
Why not I be the guy that helps out the broader community do what I've already done? Are you going to be like publicizing your story quite a bit of like going through the process of getting the 4? Because that's a huge credibility boost right there.
I would like to do that, yeah. And I think that really the beauty of it comes out in that the goal of US MFG is for that to be like an employee-owned holding company, essentially, an employee-owned network. So you're going to have these operating companies that are a partnership between an entrepreneur and U.S. manufacturing, and then U.S. manufacturing will be the employee-owned aspect of it. So all the employees will have a stake in the outcome and the success. So I think, the bigger play is building that network, and at the end of the day, the success of it will be based on the people, and they'll get paid out too because they're owners. So How does this work in practice now that you've got the mission out there? And I understand you're still in the early stages of it, but how do you see this playing out? Do you already have other entrepreneurs that you're speaking with that are already down the path of what you were doing? I'm curious what the foundation of, I'll just call it the US MFG community looks like. Yeah, so we have, I think I'm talking with 3 or 4 entrepreneurs now and a few businesses that are looking to sell. Really our goal for 2025 is 5 to 10 deals.
Okay.
Add 5 or 10 to the network and kind of get that proof of concept with the entrepreneurial mission now that we have, partnering, as opposed to doing it on our own. There's tons of people out there like me that can buy and run 2 or 3 or 4 shops, So I think finding those people is kind of our next. That's our next step. So.
I mean, part of it is, we almost need to advertise for our industry a little bit, because I am confident in saying the majority of people don't realize what type of an opportunity is there to really come up with the next generation of manufacturing ownership, small and medium-sized manufacturing ownership in the U.S. What are the ways that we just create more awareness around that? Because I honestly, I think that's going to be the bigger thing we need to overcome right now. I mean, these machines, I would hate it to be too late for folks to come and try to get these.
Yeah, I mean, that's an issue because just even like I have personal experience with a family member that worked somewhere for 30 years, and he was a mold maker, and he knew what I was doing, and I said, "Hey, what's your boss's plans?" And he's like, "Oh, it's going to his son. That's the plan." And a year and a half later, he called me and said, "Oh, we're closing in 30 days. The son wants to do something else." And it's like those are the kind of opportunities you really don't want that to happen, because it's a loss of good jobs, and it's a loss of a healthy business. So yeah, I mean, getting the word out there. It's stuff like this. It's being on LinkedIn and making connections and going to trade shows, and I think people just don't know about it. So like I was talking with someone the other day that like she'd be really skilled to own and operate a manufacturing company, and the one person in the group asked her, "Well, have you thought about buying it?" And she's like, "No, I've never thought about that. I don't even know how to do that." It's kind of like, you don't have to know how to do it if you can partner with people who do. The most value you can bring is your understanding of that business and how to grow it. How to operate it. So like, people need to be empowered with that mindset of you can do it.
Yeah, and this is where with manufacturing happy hour, I struggle sometimes as well, because I don't want this show just to be an echo chamber of our industry that knows there's an opportunity here. It's always trying to figure out how to get outside the figurative four walls of our industry, the figurative four walls of an industry trade show. And I'd be interested to hear what you're doing. One thing I'm focused on is going to more of these general tech and general entrepreneurship events in different cities. Like, we're here in Milwaukee today. This is a city that I feel is still trying to find its tech identity, its entrepreneurial identity, versus somewhere like Pittsburgh, where I just was, that is very much focused on robotics and robotics applications, because they have that history there, they have that talent coming from Carnegie Mellon University. I think there are more cities like Milwaukee out there right now that are trying to figure out what is our identity going to be as a region. What are our areas of specialties, our areas of expertise? Similar to what you were saying, right? If you're talking to a business owner, you need to show them the things that you know really well. It's not going to cut it to be like a general, hey, we're trying to be a tech-centric city right now, because we're past that point. What does that even mean? There's so many different segments of technology.
Yeah, well, and just to touch back on when you said, where do you find those people, or how do you get that word out? I know we're working with our local high schools, and the trades programs are coming back to high schools. When my dad grew up, they were in there. There was a period where they kind of shut them down, at least in my area, and they're coming back. And I think it's great to get the next generation involved in manufacturing, but also educating them in financial literacy and the business side of it. My ideal goal would be to have our right now we've rolled the other companies into one location. So to have that serve as a training ground for when you come out of your training in high school or whatever, the actual skilled trades programs that are out there, that you could go through a small manufacturing company and learn the business management side of it in practice. So I think working with young people and having that intention to teach them to own and operate a business, I think is the next level. It's good to get them involved. We need people to be manufacturers, but teaching them the financial side of it and the ownership mentality, I think will go a long way in solving that.
Yeah, so a couple of questions there, because it sounds like part of it's the schools and part of it's, your business that's doing the educating. So with the schools, so you are seeing trade schools, not trade schools, you're seeing the shop classes and things like that come back in high school.
Oh, yeah, there's a handful just in our area. You know, Chicago to Rockford, there's a lot of high schools that are putting in milling and turning and 3D printing and stuff like that. Which I'm like, man, I wish I could have gone to that. That would have been great.
Yeah, no, I mean, when did you start seeing that come back into play? And I'll be honest, like I went to a high school that did not have it as well, and then I went to be an engineer where you have your manufacturing classes in college and things like that. And I'm just thinking to myself, it's like I would have felt a little more prepared for this having that hands-on shop class.
Well, I mean, I'm probably not the best person to ask, but I remember seeing them 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm sure they were starting up, because it takes a long time to build those out, but at least the past 5 years.
Well, and I'm not necessarily looking for an exact answer. In fact, one of the goals of manufacturing happy hours is to try to explore the things that we anecdotally hear over and over and over again. And I was just talking to someone on social media that was talking about the shop classes that are available in the Upper Peninsula right now. So, we're hearing it in different parts of the Midwest, from the UP down to Chicago and no doubt other spots. But I'm glad this is a repeat conversation that I'm hearing, more so than like a one-off. It's like, oh yeah, we have a shop class in the middle of Kansas or something like that.
Yeah. I think the cool part about these shop classes that I'm involved with are their instructors are often very mutual and collaborative with the industry that's around the high school, so they'll have a board of business owners saying, hey, this is who we're looking to hire. Can you teach them more turning work, or can you teach them Mastercam, or can you teach them a specific software that people utilize in this area or skill set? So I think that's ideal.
So it's even it's even more pragmatic, because industry is providing feedback all the way down to like the high school level as to what folks need to be focused on. That's excellent. We need more of that around. You were also talking about how there's the financial literacy aspect to this as well, because that is another area that I feel is not taught enough in high school or college. Just like how to frickin' manage your finances and things like that. So how you mentioned your shops are doing that. How are you doing it?
So what we're working on right now, we're in the middle of, is implementing EOS and Great Game of Business, which is like open book management. So basically integrating those principles into our SOP of how we do this, right? And so I think there's a personal aspect to it. We're teaching people about personal finance, right? Using your life almost like a business, where money in and money out, and you can't measure, or you can't improve what you don't measure. That metric. So that's what we're in the middle of right now, where it's like, I basically had to learn it all, and then I was like, oh, I'll learn it better if I work with the GM and teach him how to do it, and we'll keep learning. And then it's like, okay, now we got to bring another shop guy in and start going through that, have the GM teaching that. So that's how we're doing it now.
I love this good back and forth we're having here around the evolution of shop classes, talking a little bit about what we think it's going to take manufacturing scenes or tech and manufacturing scenes to really get their identity. One thing I want to make sure we cover is, you mentioned that you have software that kind of ties these machine shops together. Without getting too into the weeds, like,
I can
give us the high level, like 1, 2, 3 things we should know about how it ties it together, because I think that'll also just help in understanding what's important to measure in a machine shop and things like that as well.
What it really came from, it was an outgrowth of just realizing that there's a pain point in a lot of growing up in the small machine shop. It was famine or a feast. We were super busy, or we were just dead, and so but the shop across the street from us could have been busy when we were slow. And so the concept was, okay, if we're going to build a network of people that are working together, a real value would be balancing out those different times, and creating a system where you can send work and you can send employees between close locations. Work is easier to send a little farther away, but employees, are still usually based out of one location. So the software, that's along with our ISO, streamlining ISO for us, just tracking and managing and stuff like that, it really helps with balancing workflows and labor between similarly situated companies and capabilities.
All right. So Big takeaway, balancing workflows between the different companies.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the overview of that. As we get to the end of our conversation, is there anything you wish I would have asked you that we haven't talked about yet today? We've covered your journey that led you from buying machine shops to building this US MFG community that you're right on the cusp of. And we had some good conversation around the evolution of practical manufacturing education at an earlier age.
I think one thing I want to talk about is having fun.
Yeah.
You know, like just enjoy it. Like
Yeah.
I think that the more I'm learning, it's like if I'm having fun with something, I get a lot done.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like find something that you know, it's still work, but you at least enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
And so like when I feel like I'm contributing to something that's bigger than me, I get fired up about it. So like, you know, some of the company stuff when it comes to like building that culture is, you know, laughing and just enjoying each other. And like,
Yeah.
all I want to do is build a culture where we like working together and we're working on something that's challenging. And I think a lot of people relate to that. They just want to work on a challenge and fully apply themselves and make a difference. And so you're most effective when you're enjoying it. So
you mentioned you're having fun now because of this, like the bigger mission that you're focused on.
Yeah.
Since we were talking earlier about, hey, what does it take to get more people into this industry? What were you having fun with when you were on the lathe, on the equipment, building the stuff? Tell us a bit more about that. I think this will be a fun way to wrap it up.
Oh, I enjoyed being out in the shop and programming, just like really getting your head into a project, you know, just being like fully immersed in tool and die is, you know, it's close tolerances and there's a lot of details. And so I enjoyed that when I was out there doing that because it's almost like a flow state, like when you're playing sports, you know, and you're just fully focused on that one thing. You kind of get lost in it, and you do a really good job because you're focused. So that was always fun for me. It was definitely a change of mindset between that and working on the financials or working on negotiating with sellers. Like then it was a different aspect of fun to me because I could really focus on building a relationship with someone and trusting each other. So I kind of always hone in on one or two things and just really drill deep into it. And I think both of those things were satisfying to me.
Yeah, you're building a part, you're building a relationship, you're building a company. Like there's a constant theme of building here. What was like the first thing you remember making?
Oh,
doesn't need to be the first. Could just be one that stands out as well. Maybe it was like a challenge.
I think the first like complicated work holding fixture that I made.
Yeah.
I think there was 17 parts and 9 different stations.
Okay.
Different positions it would clamp it in. So I don't know how many Mighty Bite clamps and stuff. It was just like it was wire EDM'd for holding in different positions. And I remember laying that out and being like, nice. You know, I did it. It took me probably a month to build it. It was,
What did it feel like to finally have it in your hand?
Well, it was very heavy.
Right. Yes, not literally in your hand, but to finally have that work holding cell created.
I mean, it's very satisfying because you realize that now you can do 10 times as much work because you put time into designing something right, you know, and because it was a small family shop, you know, I did everything. I modeled it out, wire burned it, machined it, assembled it, and then putting it into practice. I think it's very satisfying to be involved at every stage of a project too, you know? So that was a good one.
No, I appreciate you taking us through your personal story, some of the anecdotes we talked about. Great advice in terms of mentorship, you know, looking for companies to buy, how to do it. And I enjoyed the conversation just riffing on the future of manufacturing as well. So I know it's lattes rather than a beer, but hey, we're still going to end with a cheers. Russell, thanks so much for jumping on Manufacturing Happy Hour.
Chris.
Cheers.